Hello. In this video clip, we're looking at clause 4.3 of ISO 9001, determining the scope of the quality management system. So the criteria is as follows. The organization shall determine the boundaries and applicability of the quality management system to establish its scope. When determining this scope, the organization shall consider the external and internal issues referred to in 4.1, the requirements of relevant interested parties referred to in 4.2, the products and services of the organization. That's a very important one because, sometimes exclusions can apply, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The organization shall apply all of the recommendations of this international standards if they are applicable within the determined scope of the quality management system. The scope of the organization's quality management system shall be available and maintained as documented information. So, this is important. The scope shall state the types of products and services offered and provide justification for any requirement of this international standard that the organization determines is not applicable to the scope of the quality management system. And then conformity to this international standard can only be claimed if the requirements determined as not being applicable do not affect the organization's ability or responsibility to ensure the conformity of its products and services and the enhancement of customer satisfaction. Okay, so where do you begin? Some people interpret this as meaning the statement that appears on the certification. And in part that is correct, because from this scope, an auditor will accept a statement which needs to appear on the certification, which will sufficiently describe the scope and justify any exclusion. So there are plenty of examples I can think of where an exclusion might apply. But for example, a software engineering company may have a relationship with an established global platform, for example, where they act as agents for reselling a platform in one jurisdiction. So one of our customers here in Ireland does such a thing where there's an American software application that's popular in Ireland. They've become the agent for it in Ireland, but they also do bespoke software engineering work, and they successfully excluded the software platform from the scope of its management system when applying for ISO 9001 certification and other standards as well. And so justifying an exclusion is very important. I'd just like to take this briefly just to support our interpretation at the moment, very quickly, just to look at a couple of other things. Firstly, ISO 9000 describes a management system at clause 353. It describes it as a set of interrelated or interacting elements of an organization to establish policies and objectives and processes to achieve those objectives. Importantly, at this clause, there are a number of important notes which help you understand what it is an auditor is going to be looking for when they read a scope statement or equivalent. So number one, management system can address a single discipline, several disciplines. That's definitely, we would always try and encourage our customers to consider the broadest possible scope. Try to include everything they do within the scope of the management system, in other words. Note two, the management system elements establish the organization structure. That's a given. And I think most of you reading this and viewing this would expect to see all of those stipulations made. Note 3 to me is important because it says here that we can include the whole of the organization, specific and identified functions of an organization, or specific and identified sections of the organization. It goes further, one or more functions across a group of organizations. So I mentioned that in my preamble. I guess another part that's kind of worth thinking about here is if we are going to determine what is within the scope of the management system, to what extent do we need to document things? And we look at that under clause 4.4. But I guess we also have to consider applicability now, and for exclusions. I guess some exclusions are acceptable and some are not. So it's just important here. The requirements for applicability, it reads, are addressed in 4.3, which defines conditions under which an organization can decide that a requirement cannot be applied to any of the processes. So the last sentence is the most important there. The organization can only decide that a requirement is not applicable if its decision will not result in failure to achieve conformity of products and services. Okay, so I guess going back to the criteria in the standard itself then, what do we need to kind of really get to grip with here? Well, we need a scope statement. We need to make sure that the scope is concise enough to describe, who you are in your own market. So for Enable ISO is a delivery of consultancy services for ISO management systems certifications. And we would exclude nothing from that. That's it. That's the basics of what we do. We could, for example, include a geographical location, but given the nature of our work, we can work with people and organizations across the globe. So we wouldn't like to restrict it in any way. However, further to this, that scope statement, which appears on the certification, is the minimum element of the requirement. We have to go further because we don't describe the products and services in that short statement, and there's a requirement there. There's no picture of how we see ourselves in our own market. So a future video will look at introducing a scope statement, and this is something that we would encourage our customers to adopt as part of a consultancy or a training project. And I would encourage you to have a look at that video subsequent to this one. Thank you very much for now.